The Denver Police Department has opened an internal investigation into an incident where the editor of the Colorado Independent and a regular contributor at this roundtable, Susan Green, was handcuffed and detained after taking pictures of police interacting with a man on a sidewalk. David, you've offered some interesting analysis here as our esteemed lawyer. Give us some of the legal background that our viewers need to know.
Well, the interaction with a man was a man who was naked except for like a little sort of loincloth, sitting on the ground, handcuffed on Colfax, which has long been the wickedest street in the Rocky Mountain region. And so she happened to be coming by and thought that was pretty interesting. She's a journalist, and so she got out her cell phone and began filming it, and then got into an argument with the cops, and then she herself ended up in handcuffs. I think there's a conflict of laws here. On the one hand, there is Colorado's 2015 law, whose lead sponsor was State Representative Joe Salazar, which plainly says that anybody has the right to film the police in a public place as long as they're not interfering with what the police are doing. That's very clear. But there's another law which the police officer in his argument with Susan Green referenced, which is called HIPAA, Health Insurance Portability and Privacy Act. And that says if you're a covered entity under HIPAA, you have to protect the privacy of patients. In fact, New York City, a New York hospital just got a $2 million civil lawsuit against it, which they ended up paying because they'd allowed patients there to be filmed without their prior consent. I will say the law enforcement officers in my family don't routinely roll out HIPAA as some like pretext for whatever they're doing, and they wouldn't think about it at all unless they'd been trained in that. So I suspect this officer had training. According to what he said, this was a medical thing they were dealing, and yeah, the guy was in handcuffs, but if you're naked on East Colfax, maybe you're having some mental problem or something, and handcuffing is for everybody's safety, including that individual's. Is the Denver Police Department what's called a covered entity under HIPAA? Well, it's part of the Department of Public Safety, and I went to the federal government website, which gives you the test to see, are you covered by HIPAA? Which is A, do you provide medical services? Certainly yes, the Department of Public Safety does that to people in the jail. Even police officers are also trained to provide basic medical services. B, do you transmit electronic medical records? Yes, because they'll take the medical records of what they do, and then they might transmit them to a hospital or anybody else. And if that's it, then you're covered by HIPAA. So it may be this officer was trained in HIPAA and thought he had to protect the privacy of this guy being filmed without consent. There's going to be an investigation, which there should. But this is another example of what another guest on our show, the late Ken Gordon, said, based on his experience as an attorney. Someone comes into your office and tells you one story. Before you, as a lawyer, decide where you're going to go on the case, don't just jump off on hearing one side of things.
Eric, I think we ought to be grateful that we probably have a couple credit hours now of law school training that now we've received from David, which I'm very grateful for. But politically, if you're the new Denver police chief and you're just getting used to your new offices and getting assignments, and here you go, chief. This just popped in as a headline. You've got a reporter in handcuffs and everything else. You're getting articles from all over the country about it. How is Denver police handling this the right way, considering the situation?
Let me start with happy birthday to Susan Green. Today's her birthday, so and kudos to Susan as well for really being so dogged on this particular issue. I don't think she ever expected driving down Colfax that day to become the story as opposed to the person writing the story, but indeed she became the story. No, this is not what the Denver Police Department needs. I will take the couple credit hours from David and let him opine from the legal perspective, which I can't weigh in on. From a perspective of politics or policy or plain old optics, it's awful. And maybe I'm overly cynical, but I don't buy that officer had necessarily HIPAA in his mind and was first and foremost about trying to protect that individual's healthcare privacy rights. I think this is emblematic of too many incidents within the Denver Police Department over the last several years, as well as other police departments around our state and around the country, of trying to throw their weight around, and I think they picked the wrong person to throw their weight around. We'll see what their internal investigation reveals. We'll see whether they try to justify it and defend it or cop to it. And we'll see if I know anything about the Colorado Independent, Susan Green and Tina Griego and the rest of them, they're not going to let it go. And they will stay on top of it. And this is one that will not just go away quietly. It's going to get handled in a high-profile way.
Krista, you've also taught at various universities about media and press and a variety of other issues. You're getting handed this situation. You're going to talk to your students about it. What are the headlines? What do we need to know about what's going on here with the journalists and the police and everything in between?
I would say I have sympathy for both groups here. I mean, Susan Green was doing her job, and she knows that many mentally ill people have been either received abuse or just simply not gotten the service they've needed in jails, not just in Colorado, but across the country. And so she was looking out for that man. On the other hand, keeping his privacy, they're waiting for the ambulance to come. I could see the frustration on the part of the police. Handcuffing a member of the press and putting him in the car, obviously the wrong choice, but I think they were probably frustrated as well. The problem is if we as a society insist on keeping our mentally ill people in jails and on the street instead of in institutions where they can get the care that they need, these kinds of things are going to happen.
Patty, do you go through a variety of HIPAA explanations with your reporters before they get out to the Denver area?
It's usually Miller High Life rather than HIPAA. And in fact, I have a reporter who was in a very similar situation not that long ago. Although we encounter HIPAA all the time because you cannot get access to information. And I'm assuming that had things been a little calmer, Susan would have not used those photos in any case because they're not going to exploit a naked man who is having real trouble. She would have written the story, but the odds are good she wouldn't have used the photos. But we had a similar situation that did not involve HIPAA. I'm the only one at this table. You are a lawyer, you've taught, but I have bailed reporters out of jail on numerous occasions, including one time when a reporter went to a concert, saw a security guard roughing up a kid. Cops came. My reporter jumped in to try to take action, my Miller High Life Fueled reporter at the time, and he wound up getting thrown in the clink for disobeying an officer. And I had to bail him out the next day. He was technically working as a journalist. He was reporting on what he saw. He unfortunately was also maybe a little intoxicated. So there are a lot of judgment calls. Basically, when you're a reporter, you go out to get the story. You work as hard as you can to get the story. But if you're drunk, maybe you should call your editor and have her come.